This was a good therapy session. Maybe we'll have like mid-dive therapy sessions as a standard where we all just could
mid-dive, start of the dive as well. I complain about my flight. You complain about your mechanic, you know.
we just complain about things now. That's what we do here. Hello and welcome back to The Dive, driven by Kia Season 8, Episode 25. We made it. We've all been really looking forward to number 25.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
Really have been.
One of my top 25 favorite numbers.
My first question is, where's Batman?
Dude.
Where's your Batman?
Dude, come on. It's sick.
It is super sick.
Yeah.
I'm seriously asking. Who do you have? Is there a Batman sweatshirt or
Is Sneaky Batman?
Yeah, is Sneaky Batman?
It's Dr. Dre's Batman.
Oh,
You gotta watch the music video, dude. You gotta.
Okay, I'm completely out of the loop now. I'm like, well, whoops. Do you know what he's talking about?
Yeah, it's the new Eminem music video.
Oh, okay, yeah. I've heard it.
Houdini, right?
Yeah.
I heard it. That one was really nostalgic. It did take me back.
It is very nostalgic. Yeah. I listened to the whole album though. There wasn't a lot of songs I loved on it, to be honest.
Yeah, dude.
But I only listened to it once.
I feel like listening to albums in their entirety is so hard to do because like all the songs kind of blend together at some point.
I just kind of pop it on when I'm gaming, right? Because I was like, oh, Eminem. Like I listened to all his stuff when I was a kid, so it's definitely nostalgic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just doing a drive somewhere with some friends and they put it on and I was like, yeah, I probably don't need to listen to this whole album, but it was nostalgic. We have a bunch of things that we need to advertise, though, for the LCS. The dive is selling out. We've got LCS.
What do you mean? You want to advertise?
Yeah. We want to, we have to, and we want to. They're both true. The LCS Summer Game Show match that we did when it actually spawned because of the dive. So I feel pretty proud about this one. But Azael and us were arguing who would win, Canada or Team USA. And so then we actually got the players to play a Team Canada versus Team USA. The actual teams that we came up with.
The power of the dive.
Yeah. We could actually move mountains. And what is crazy is how quickly it actually happened. Yeah. You know, stuff doesn't usually move that quickly, but we played it after the games last weekend, and we are going to premiere it on Friday.
Yeah, it's going to be on the LCS YouTube channel. So check that out if you want to see who wins between USA and Canada. Mm-hmm. I didn't actually get to see it. I had crazy FOMO for this because I was on the way back from Canada, and I had the absolute trip from hell. So this is the craziest trip I think I've ever had returning. Well, probably just craziest trip period I've ever had. So my first flight, like I had a layover, and then that flight gets delayed multiple times, whatever. My flight gets canceled. They're like, no problem. We'll rebook you. We'll get you on another flight. That flight gets delayed multiple times. Then that flight gets canceled. Then they are saying no more flights are going out today. And there's one person for hundreds of people to rebook with. So you wait in this huge line. You get to the front. And they say the next flight you can go out on is in 2 days. So I'm stuck in Syracuse for 2 full days. After multiple flight cancellations, nothing.
You just your phone and you?
Just my phone and me sitting in a Syracuse airport hotel. I mean, I was watching LCS and stuff like that, but didn't do much of anything, honestly. It was crazy. Apparently, there was some weather that was coming in that they couldn't fly out because of, but it was like you look outside and it was totally sunny, so it felt extra bad. Then my flight was at like 6 a.m. on Monday, and I go on that flight. And they like changed me from an aisle seat to a middle seat, and I had 2 real big people beside me. So it was like really, really squished and uncomfortable. And we had a kid behind us that, this is not an exaggeration, from when we were boarding to when we got off, was screaming at the top of his lungs like he was being murdered for over 5 hours straight, while his mother sat beside him watching a movie, not acknowledging him in any way the entire time. It was crazy. And then also they ran out of food. So there was no food on the plane on my 5-hour flight, and I was starving.
Feels like you're just putting together all of the classic airplane complaints into one giant airplane complaint sandwich.
Complaint. Yeah.
This is the sandwich of everything that could go wrong.
And then they told me they send you this link that's like, oh, click this link, you can get a free hotel or whatever. But of course it doesn't work. And they're like, no hotels are available. But it says you can book your own and they'll reimburse you.
Wait, you didn't have to stay in the airport, right?
No, I just booked a hotel because it says they'll reimburse you. But then when I submit my receipts and stuff, it says you'll hear back within 8 weeks. So I swear to God, if you don't,
totally
if they don't pay me back,
they definitely will.
Yeah,
8 weeks.
Don't fly United. That's the summary of this story here. It was terrible. This Saturday, though, is also going to be really fun. I had crazy FOMO not being at the show match, but also it seemed like the crowd was really good because you guys had TLC 9 going on. The crowd was popping off. Even for the following match, the crowd seemed really, really good watching online. So it definitely made me feel like I was really missing out.
They were super good for the show match also.
That's awesome. Yeah. And this coming Saturday is our final theme day of the LCS split. It's the Summer Bash tailgate, which is like pool party type theme. Usually there's all the teams bring out stuff. There's often like some sort of free food and snacks and boba trucks and stuff.
Dunk tank.
There's Dunk Tank. There's all kinds of stuff. Last theme day we had, FlyQuest did like free lemonade. I think it was maybe Cloud9 did like snow cones or something. There was like churros. There's a bunch of stuff, and it's all free. So definitely, if you guys haven't already got your tickets for this final weekend, you should come out on Saturday because the theme days are pretty bomb.
Also, for some reason, they literally gave every single person in the audience last time a beach ball and blew them all up. And so there was like 500 beach balls. And then they all,
sick.
I taunted the audience and they all started pelting them at me. And one of my favorite gifts that we have on the LCS is me like with this blow up palm tree, like fighting off all of the the beach balls. It was super good time. Everybody was really into the summer theme.
Yeah, that day was definitely sick. So if you're looking for something to do this Saturday, definitely come out to the LCS. Another thing that happened recently that there's been a lot of talk about was this video that got posted or leaked or whatever you want to say of Faker post game. It was after their series against Gen G, I believe, where he made a mistake at the end, was obviously very frustrated. But it's of him hitting his head against the wall. And it starts out fairly light, and then he just kind of give himself a good whack against the wall, and I think Guma stops him. But a lot of people saw this, and a lot of people, were very kind of sympathetic towards him and the pressure that he is facing. I did see some like kind of nasty comments and whatnot, but in general, I just found it really concerning. Like I watched it, and I kind of found it pretty scary, honestly, because it's just like it makes you realize. I tweeted about this, but it really does make you again realize and think about how much pressure that these players are under. And obviously, you've experienced this. And especially someone like Faker, who is always under a magnifying glass. He is by far the most famous esports player, I think, in the world of any game. I think that's pretty easy to say. There's just so many eyes on him and so much pressure on him, and he's been at the top of the game for 10 years plus. And obviously, he holds himself to a really, really high standard. Very clearly, he cares a tremendous amount about the wins and losses, about how he's performing and, how he's doing. So it just kind of hurt me a little bit to see him, feeling like that and feeling like, and reacting like that. Because it was a tough watch for sure. And, definitely, I hope that, if he is having kind of like mental health struggles, that T1 is there and providing that support for him and providing whatever he needs. And if it is just like a blip in the radar, that at least people are there to kind of support him and realize that it's like, hey, this is just one thing, it's one mistake, it's not a big deal, we're gonna move past it. Whatever kind of support he needs, I hope that he is getting it, because at least I found it pretty hard to watch him, pretty concerning.
Yeah, I think the support is the key part. Everybody's super cognizant of mental health, especially after the Danny and EG stuff that happened. So every team kind of being able to have that type of support, because the pressures of extreme competition are intense, and it starts very early.
Yeah, I mean it was definitely sad to watch. I don't know, like I kind of understood it when I saw it the first time. I didn't think it was like that big of a deal, because I mean, obviously it's not like a healthy way to cope with the situation, but I get why he's upset. And I've seen people like react really poorly to that kind of situation. Like they just keep losing to Gen G. Like I'm sure Faker really wants to win, and there was like that really tough team fight where he like valked in and kind of threw the game. So like I get why he's upset for sure. Obviously, bashing your head against the wall is not really going to make anything better. So not great, but
It's tough, because I've also been I've been on sports teams with people that have literally broken bones in their hands from punching the wall. I've known people that have done like real self like extreme self-harm also, and so it's a very scary continuum.
Yeah, I mean, and some people will like, take that out on their teammates or other people. So, obviously not good. But hopefully he comes back from it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he will. I think with any of these things, it's just thinking about, healthy ways or more healthy ways to try to like deal with the frustration and deal with the anger, right? Because like it's totally natural to be, frustrated, to be, angry with yourself in that situation, but like finding, better ways to do it. Because yeah, it's Faker is not unique in having done this, and like you're talking about, there are more extreme situations. It happens, but it's definitely scary stuff, and it's not. Not the best way to handle it. So
yeah,
hopefully he's okay. Hopefully he's feeling totally fine. And hopefully we'll see him at his best back soon.
Yeah, hopefully he is, and I think he will be.
Yeah. I mean, he seems incredibly mentally strong. Otherwise, he wouldn't, I don't think, have been this successful for this long, right? So it's definitely interesting to see, how people are handling all this. But hopefully people can learn from it and take away something positive. Something else, obviously, that did happen this weekend, we touched on it, very briefly, but TLC9 happened this past weekend, and TL is still undefeated in series, which is pretty
C9 is not, for some reason.
Yeah, for some reason, C9 is not.
Dude, those... are we talking about it later, or are we getting into it now? Because I got some
Let's
thoughts.
go right now. The topic has been broached.
Well,
yeah.
I was just going to touch on the TL thing first, and then we can get into the actual series. But
sure,
just that this would make it the first ever team in LCS history to go. I don't know. I guess we don't want to call it perfect season. Do we want to call it undefeated in series or just undefeated? Because I always think it's interesting to talk about. I think it's a great accomplishment if they do go 7-0 in series, but I also don't think it is the perfect season. Just like I didn't think that when T1 went undefeated in series, it was an undefeated season or perfect season.
Yeah, as soon as you asked that, I was like, I have an answer. I would say undefeated in series, but yeah. I know, there are people on both sides that
that's one of those technically correct things, but I don't know when you give it the whatever you want to call it, like just the eye test, like you look at it. It's like, it's such a short season, and they did drop games during the season. Like, I don't know. Like, yeah, I guess technically it's undefeated, but it's kind of, a smaller scale undefeated than some other things.
Well, and to me, you just have to compare the game score, right? It's not like there isn't an easy comparison. You just compare the game score to the best BO1 series. Immortals went, 17-1? TL are 15-5, right? Like, that's a one-to-one comparison. You could say, well, those losses don't count because they won the series, but it's like,
Well, it's also more games, so it's like there's always going to be something that you can draw your line on and nitpick on, but yeah, that's why I would say add the thing of like undefeated in series.
That's how I feel, and I think, this is not to like knock down TL, because I do think it's a really big accomplishment to still be able to go 7-0 in series to make that full run, and. Now we can kind of get into the series itself if you want, Meteos, but I just thought it was really exciting watching it because this was very, very competitive, and I was really hoping that we were going to have that triumvirate of C9, TL, and FlyQuest all really, really be super, super competitive with each other.
Yeah.
And it feels like we're getting that, right? Like, because sometimes you build the hype, and you're getting really excited for something, and then it's like...
FlyQuest Dignitas!
Exactly, and then it's like that, and then someone just gets absolutely smacked, and you're like, well, it wasn't that close after all.
Yeah, I mean, it was a super good series, especially the first game. Like, that was one of, probably off the top of my head, it would be the best game of the season so far for me, because it was, even though at first the drafts didn't look super cool, like, anytime there's an Ivern in the game, I can't take it super seriously, but the way that they played was so fun to watch. Like, they were just contesting everything. It was constantly back and forth. I know if you looked at the gold graph, it was a legit roller coaster, like some kind of math function wave. Like, it was just totally crazy.
And it was really close pretty much the whole way through. I'm actually looking at the gold graph right now. The like biggest. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say. Also, it was more interesting than looking at the graphs. The team fights. It really felt like this team would win a team fight. We would reset. We would come back. The other team would then win a team fight. We would reset. We would come back. And the mechanics in the team fights were so sick. I was just like, what in the heck? This is that was such a treat.
JoJo's Zeri was actually really good.
The Zeri game, I was like, oh my god! Every time he has flash up, he is using it offensively by getting himself in with dash and baiting them, and then flashing and punishing whoever tried to go on him.
Yep.
And so it like draws one member of the enemy team too deep into the team fight, and then they're chasing them down. It was really fun to watch.
Yeah, it was like every single team fight. Just whoever would go in would die. It was like, it's such a razor's edge. Super fun to watch. Unfortunately, the rest of the games weren't as close.
The second game was as far from close.
Oh yeah,
that was the bottom triple kill for Yawn. Game.
Yeah, that one was a little bit disgusting. No, TL did one of the funniest plays though. That game was they after that triple kill bottom, we didn't see exactly how it was set up during the game because there was the replay. But right after the replay, we come back and the bottom lane is killing Blabber at his red buff in top side jungle. Like, if I'm the jungler, I'm just like, all right, I guess you win. Better jungler wins. Their bot lane is just invading me. But, it was so good. We actually did get to see it after the game when they replayed it. It showed that Impact used his timer to go and put down a pink ward in the jungle. So they saw Blabber going to the red. And then I guess their bot lane was just around mid. So they rotated up for the invade. And so, I mean, that's just it feels so bad when you're a jungler and the laners are ganking you.
Yeah.
It's just so rough. And it seems like TL clearly had a plan to deal with this Sejuani. C9 just couldn't really get it going. And one criticism I think that C9 has faced is, I've kind of brought it up as a concern before, but the more that they win, the worse their drafts get. And I think we really saw that in this series against TL. Like, obviously TL played really well, not taking away from them, but C9 went for these like no magic damage or CC drafts where if the other team's getting away,
especially game 3, yeah.
I mean, but both game 2 and game 3, if the other team does not have to build one Merc Tread on their whole team, you done goofed in the draft. Like, that is not real, unfortunately. And so I think that was a pretty big mistake by them in their drafts. And, I was able to punish it pretty hard.
There's a couple of these things that we were hitting on a whole bunch. One of them, of course, was the boots in that game with the 10% reduction on auto attacks now. But also, Team Liquid, one of the things that you mentioned that we hit on a bunch of times that they do really well. And Sven was saying they even do this even earlier in scrims, but they will rotate APA down to the bottom lane and put their bottom lane and mid lane a lot earlier than most teams. The game 2 example is super extreme because they just got a triple kill.
Yeah.
And so they had full prio plus a bunch of money. And so they just won the entire game there. They're like, to me, that was such a cool way of taking this is probably like in scrims we go, we're remaking, you just got so much gold on this Ezreal. But they took that beginning of the game and they made sure that it is going to be a win by like moving that point of power to the middle of the map where you can influence everywhere. And by Impact being the GOAT that he is, laying the groundwork and the deep vision and really punishing. I just thought that is so cool because for a long time people have been asking ever since we did all these changes for lane swaps and changes to towers and all these like different weird rules that we have around minions and towers. How come teams don't just like start with their duos in the mid lane because it's the center of the map and because you can make these types of plays, especially if you have roam timers for support and stuff. But I just thought that was so cool, and it's something that Team Liquid seems like they're really pioneering in North America at the very least. And to your point about how from the jungler's perspective, how it feels, like that is the reason why my mid lane autofill champion is Talon, because I can flip over the back of the wall and always go.
The amount of times I've just been killed by Talon one tricks who they leave mid. And now I'm on hyper alert. I am just like so far like in the back of my jungle so I can bail, but they will just flash ult you at full HP and ignite and one shot you, and I'm just like, what is happening? Like, I'm getting dizzy from this. So yeah, that champion.
I couldn't beat that problem, so I became that problem.
I mean, that's good. That's literally how a lot of people learn League. When they start out, it's just like
they get pissed at something.
Yeah, something owns you so hard, you're like, you know what? I want to do that. I want to be on the other side of this.
I'm going to play that.
I want to be on the other side of this.
That's for sure. Something that I have heard echoed so many times talking to pros and coaches about TL is that more so than any other team, C9 is known as a really good scrim team as well. But against TL, everyone just tells me if you fall behind at all, it feels absolutely hopeless. Like you're guaranteed to lose. Whereas, some people are like, well, C9's really, really dominant, but sometimes they'll troll and they'll make more mistakes. And you can say, oh, well, maybe Blabberlint or this will happen or that'll happen. And, Berserker will do something silly and try to style and we can kill him and we can come back. Everyone just tells me if you're down in gold against TL, the game is lost. And it's just that's how it feels. And I think, that is one thing I really want to give them a lot of credit for in this series. I thought they were very, very controlled. Obviously, game 2 was, as you say, really extreme. It was basically over at level 1, but they snowballed that incredibly well. And game 3, you could talk a lot about draft, but it was a close game in gold, and TL were really, really controlled the whole way through. And I think never overextended in fights. We're having all these fights where people get low health, but TL would always kind of just back off and be able to just maintain this scaling advantage until they got to the point where they could basically never lose, right? Where they got so much armor and they have 5 tabbies and they have multiple Randuins and they have all these things that are going to guarantee their win. And, even Death Stance, Corki, and all this stuff, right?
Yeah. I mean, I remember late game, Berserker was pretty fed 4-item Lucian. He ran up and traded autos with Corki. Mm-hmm. Corki took almost no damage and Berserker took half his health. Yeah. And I was like, that's a tanky Corki.
Berserker's build was also really bad, I think, for that game. I mean, he was obviously trying to snowball the game early, exactly. Right? But he did go Collector Rapid Fire, right? And you're full physical against this mega tanky team. And then we had Thanatos, who in game 2 went Black Cleaver when there was no armor. In game 3, he went Eclipse when there was infinite armor, right? So there was definitely some people were making the argument of lost to the shopkeeper. I don't know that the Essence Revolution build would have changed the difference. I don't know that Black Cleaver would have made the difference. I don't think it would have.
Yeah, I don't think so.
But it was also interesting for those of you who are curious on pros this week. Sven was hosting it, but Berserker and were both on it, and they were talking about this series and talking about how they thought it was going to go. And my take on the C9 series, on the C9 draft, was very clearly they thought they're going to absolutely super stomp early game and be able to snowball, right? But those drafts are just really hard to execute on if the other team doesn't make mistakes and just kind of gives up the minimum and is willing to seed things. Then it's really hard to get enough of an advantage that you're going to be able to actually roll over and kind of ignore the draft diff. But that's even what was talking about on pros. Was his assumption. Was he was saying he saw the draft and he didn't think C9's draft basically was bad. He just thought that they were going to fight them for literally everything throughout the whole early game and try to stomp them, because he said when he was looking at it as the jungler, he was looking and he didn't think basically he could win anywhere. He's like, oh, I can't go to any objective. I can't fight any lane. We lose every 2v2. We lose the 3v3s, And that was kind of his point of view, because you have double melee solo laners with Sejuani and you have Lucian Nami bot, right? So he was thinking C9 was going to really be able to snowball. And Berserker said something kind of similar, was that it was he was kind of saying draft gap, but he was also saying, well, we made mistakes,
Yeah, it's you have to win early, and they did not win.
I don't know, dude. I think you have to be such a better team than your opponents to win with a draft like this. I think I'm not someone who generally will say draft gap as the first thing for a series, because yeah. I mean, yeah, you can always make the argument, the winning team had a better draft for this reason, this reason, this reason. But for me, it always boils down to, even when I was a player, the thing I'd always tell my coach is, I'm like, I don't care that much what comp you have, just give me something with enough frontline and CC damage spread, because the reason that damage spread always matters is, anyone who's played solo queue will know that when you have all AD and your last pick locks in Yasuo and you're just what are you doing, dude? Someone will inevitably say, don't worry, they don't have a tank, it's fine. And it's the tank isn't the reason that stacking all one damage type's a problem. It's that they can all build the efficient boot and never have to build the other type of resistance, right? It's if you just have one AP threat who can get its Sork boots and threaten to one-shot somebody who's not respecting it, then that's so much more pressure in your game. And so when you draft the way C9 did, and nobody needs to even consider building MR the whole game, they can get a really, really efficient defensive buy as well. You're just at a huge disadvantage the entire game. It doesn't matter if they're a tank or not. Like, this Corki became a tank because of the draft imbalance.
And then TL also had tanks too. So
yeah, I mean the Jax itself, like even though the gold was close game 3, there was really no world where C9 could ever do anything.
Unless TL got blown out and they got Baron.
Yeah, I mean TL would have had to grief it incredibly hard.
Yeah, no, I thought this was a huge draft advantage for sure, but it's just, I think it's interesting to talk about too. I mean, also I think part of what made it more severe to me is just that not only was it full physical damage, but neither of the physical damage dealers that they have, none of them are good tank killers, right? Yep. Like, it's not like you had this like super hyper carry ADC who can deal with tanks. You had Lucian going like an early, spiking build, and you have a Yone. Yone's not going to be able to just like sit there, even though he did go Kraken Bork. He went tank later or whatever because he was getting kind of dumpstered. But like, you can't sit there as a Yone, no matter what your build is, and just like hit a full tank Maokai and win that team fight. It just doesn't work, right? Maybe in a side lane that works, but I thought they were pretty checkmated in draft, but I did think TL handled it really, really well.
Yeah, I think everybody's on the same page as far as what that was. That was we have to snowball, we have to win early, and we don't have a lot of options, and it's very hard to do that. And so you'll go into games, and it's like, oh well, what you have to do to win this game is way harder than what the opponent has to do to win this game, even though it's still possible for you to win. That's what a draft gap is.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say too, though, I think TL did show that they're a really good team in the series. Like they played super well, even if Cloud9 probably didn't show up their best that day. I think that, to me, what always shows that a team is really good. And you'll see this a lot in, like best of fives or whatnot, where if teams are trading games, the better team, when they lose, it'll be like a super close, like long, drawn out battle that they like barely lose because they might have messed up something early. Game 1, APA even said himself, in all chat in game 2, he said, "You barely beat me while I was trolling," which I thought was hilarious. Flame. It's like you're flaming them for beating you while you were feeding. Like
he does that a lot, where he uses himself as the way to flame them.
Yeah, and I respect that. I respect it. It was super funny. But then when TL gets one advantage, they just run with it.
Yeah, and it feels like that there's nothing that you can do, namely like the game number 2. But to me, I was so happy with this series because it showed so much of what we talked about on last episode when we were setting up this series. And I was like, oh man, it feels like Cloud9 are like this, don't study, but show up for the test, and you're so cool, and you still do so well. And they're always like snowballing, but Team Liquid is so much more studious, and they're so much more methodical. And Spawn always really emphasizes the steps to the game and control and efficiency. And then we see all of that really play out here. And Team Liquid's side come out on top. I had jumped on kind of with Meteos, where I was like, you know what? People are kind of getting me, where everyone talking about TL's overrated, and we had just seen them struggle a bit when Umpty was targeted in his jungle champion pool. So I was kind of leaning on that side, and I was like, you know what? I kind of want to see like the other side of this overtake TL, because we've been talking about TL all split long. And I wanted to see, like the real fight at the top and the overtake, the competition. But I no longer think Team Liquid are overrated. I still identify there are some areas that can be punished. I still think that Umpty / his champion pool is a possible area, and APA does make some of these boneheaded mistakes. They're like, he's like, I'm trolling, but he actually was trolling in that game with some of the kills early on and some of the plays there. So but those two things, usually when you're going down the list of like things you want to target on the enemy team or areas of weakness of an opponent team, you've just got this giant laundry list, right? But for TL, I felt that is a very short list, and I just have so much confidence in the structure that they play League of Legends with.
Yeah, and I think the APA thing, like last year, it was like a glaring target, right? Where it's like you can just blast this guy apart. Now, yeah, he does have his games where he has a bad game, but they're getting more and more rare. Like even APA is getting more and more difficult to target and to punish. Like he's getting very good at actually playing out a lot of these situations and playing them out, pretty aggressively without just inting. Like he had a bad game one, but he is getting really consistent.
I'm at the point where I'm like thinking about my All-Pro, and he's in my top spot. I'm moving around my All-Pro. I'm like, JoJo is the reverse situation where like the Zeri game, I'm like, man, this guy is still so good. And look at all the mechanics are insane. The mind games are insane. But I don't know. I feel like AP has gotten so much better and TL are the better team. So it's
JoJo's peaks are higher, I think, but I think he's less consistent.
That's why I'm like, you know what? We're talking about this like as an area that you target, and I'm also talking about he's in my first All-Pro.
The first team All-Pro mid laner.
Good luck with that. This laundry list is not very strong.
It's hard, man. But it's also a big deal because top 2 for that bye or for the bye is a really big deal as well. Going to playoffs, because if you finish top 2 in the regular season, it's one series and you're guaranteed top 3, which means you go to Worlds, right? So that's actually a really big deal. TL is guaranteed top 2 now. If they win, they're guaranteed first place. For Fly C9, because both those teams lost to TL, whoever loses there is not going to be top 2 and is not going to get that bye. So C9 have to kind of run the gauntlet their final 2 weeks. They have their biggest challenges, obviously. They went up against TL, and you can say, it's draft if, whatever. But if they lose to FlyQuest as well, then there's not really any excuses, right? Because you get both your opponents, your fate is fully in your hand, and same thing for FlyQuest. So this is going to be such an exciting match again. It really is pretty hype that our last 2 weeks have these 2 matchups that are, I think, some of the very best possible matchups we could get for the whole thing. Because those are the big 3. They look like they're far and away the best teams. And it's going to be really, really exciting on Sunday, I think, as a result.
Yeah, I love it. Our last couple of weeks of regular season are super exciting. And then I actually really like the structure of the playoffs that we have now. Mm-hmm. So we're going to have some really exciting playoffs coming right after it, and then even then, because of the timing, it feels like we're going to go into Worlds very quickly after that too. So we're just
like 2 weeks.
We're just gonna be like, we're gonna be peaking for a long time. I feel like
I saw that Twitch channel that plays every year where they play all the World games up until current, and I was watching some yesterday, and it was like Season 2 Worlds. And it's so interesting to go back and watch those old games because, I mean, it's actually just so nostalgic at this point, seeing how old League looked, because that's what I started with. I played so much of that watching. I'm just like, wow.
Yeah.
Game has changed a lot.
That meme where people always tweet out the picture of these are the streets I grew up on. It's like the super old graphics League of Legends. I'm like,
it's funny. I mean, I didn't play. I mean, I played in beta, but like I didn't even get to level 30, and I didn't really start playing till, I don't know, Season 6 or whatever it was. But even then, it was still the old graphics and stuff, and it's really weird to think. Because in my head, that's not even League. Like, I guess I just didn't have enough years on it, right? So, like, I can't even remember what it looks like, even though, like, I was at Riot when they were developing the new SR and the visual update and everything. So it's just funny because when I see it, I'm like, I literally cannot remember playing that League, even though I did for a while.
You're like, what is this? Some 8-bit stuff I'm watching? Is this Pong?
Because when I played, I didn't think the graphics were bad. Yeah. But then when you see it, you're like, whoa.
It doesn't feel as bad as I kind of remember it. So like in my head, I'm thinking, it's like so 8-bit or whatever. But when I was watching Season 2 World stuff, I was like,
nice.
I mean, it might just be the familiarity, but I was like, like
it's just natural.
Like last hitting the minions and stuff, and like seeing the minions auto attacks be these like big red balls and stuff. Like now they're a lot more subtle. Like sometimes you don't notice you're getting your ass beat by a bunch of ranged minions. Back then you certainly did.
The minions got sneaky.
They did.
They're like, they're respecting our damage too much. Now we gotta have.
They also had
smaller projectiles.
They had the old thing where the minions would get this big orange highlight around them when they were targeting you, which it's kind of tacky. I think that the update they done looks a lot better, but there is a certain charm to the older graphics in the early days of League.
It'll be interesting too, because the last update came when, like 2015 or something like that. The graphics update was probably like
it was season 5.
2015.
It was season 5.
Okay.
We're gonna be playing in space from Mars.
Okay.
On the
So
next
I guess
one.
I was definitely playing before season 6 then, because I was playing when it was the old thing. Yeah. So it'll be interesting, because that's a long time ago now. Yeah. So who knows? Maybe they'll do another visual update, and then this will see. Then we'll look back at this in 10 years and be like, what were we playing on? You know? Like,
well, the next one is gonna be like full VR, and we're walking around. And we're like, what? It used to be like top down, like
Riot employees are the minions.
Yeah.
A freak is Baron Nashor.
Man, for so long I've been like, man, I can't wait to be in this live in a game, type of VR MMO style game. I'm like, I would be so in there.
Yeah. All the VR this is totally separate topic, but like, have you guys tried much VR? Because mostly Riv had all the VR stuff, so I remember going over his house a few times and trying them. And most of the stuff that had any movement made me so nauseous, because it would just like jerk you forward and stuff. It wasn't like you were running. It would just be like you just kind of like warp forward. It made me so nauseous. So the VR stuff, I always thought that was going to be super cool. But then when I play VR stuff, I'm like, it's not that good.
I think that's a big reason why it didn't blow up so much. So personally, I didn't get nauseous when I did, but so many of my friends, I'd be like trying it with a couple friends, and it would be like 50% or more of the people, whenever I'm trying it, would feel that way. And so then, nobody wants to, we'll do something else, right?
And you need a lot of space.
Yeah.
Like he had like a huge living room, so you actually had like a lot of space. I'm like, I don't have room for that in my house. Like you need to be able to clear out some area to like move around.
And because it's so expensive, there's a big hardware barrier, and so you don't have a very big audience, and so that's why less people build software for that expensive hardware. So it's kind of this cycle of you need to pass the barrier to make it accessible for everybody, so it's like easy for anyone to get it at home. Yeah. There's a price barrier there, plus like you're saying, an ease of use and space and type of stuff that you have to overcome, and then that would get more people making better software for it, so you actually have better games.
Yeah,
like right now, it's they don't even have like step really number 1. We never got to, but I still really enjoy a lot of ones, like some shooting zombie ones, and like some Beat Saber.
Yeah, Beat Saber is a classic. I actually
Travis has one.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I got for my birthday a couple of years ago. Actually, like my WoW guild pitched in and got me a VR headset, which was super cool.
That's cute.
And so I think it's just one of those that it was like the MetaQuest 2, where like you just like draw on the ground the area you want to play in. Yeah. And it is really cool, but I do kind of have that motion sick thing that a lot of people get if I play for too long. But yeah, I mean, I'm still excited about it. I think, give it some more time. And I think once more people start developing for VR, once it gets a little bit smoother, it'll be super cool.
The games I will say I did enjoy were the games where like you were stationary but things were happening around you. I thought that was cool. Like there was some that I was playing where you're like defending a castle and you're like shooting arrows at stuff, right? Because then I didn't have to move around. Things around me were moving, so then that didn't make me motion sick. And there was another one where you're playing like in a spaceship and you're like in a turret, so you like spin around and shoot. And shoot. That was fun because that didn't make me motion sick. But it'll be interesting to see what the future happens with that.
The zombie one I played was really like the shooting one was super fun because I always loved like Time Crisis one. Nice. But then it was really short. I feel like a lot of the games, a lot of the software, because there's not a big audience, like they don't have a lot of time to put into it. So you're going to beat every game pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think it's still, like the AAA developers and whatnot are not really like fully behind it yet because it's going to hit a point where like a tipping point where
plug me in. I've always wanted to be in the Matrix.
All right.
Same, dude. I'll upload my consciousness.
You want to be in one of those what are they, the isekais or whatever, where you go into the game?
I've how they've been doing so many recently. I've watched most.
There are a lot of them.
I've watched so many of those recently. We did have some milestones, so these are always kind of funny as we go down the list of other important occurrences. But Vulcan passing Xmithy for 6 all-time assists. To me, when I see those pop up, I'm like, this is on the borderline of like, well,
6 to me is like,
yeah. I'm like, okay, neat. I'm still clapping because it's like showing up on.
But you're
screen.
not clapping very loud.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of like when someone says something funny, you're like, they think it's funny, so you give them the LMAO or whatever, but you're just like,
no, it's a lowercase LOL for that one. It's yeah. I mean, sometimes it kind of feels like a bit at some point with some of them. It's just like it'll be a not a round number for the amount of kills or assists or the placement. It'll be like so and so gets 233 kills, making them the 130 like fifth person on the leaderboard. I'm just like, dude, I don't care at all. Like, what? Like, is this a bit?
No, I mean, sometimes I just think they're fun little tidbits.
Yeah.
The Impact one is actually crazy, though, how he has the most...
that one's cool because...
Most all-time.
Yeah, I mean, that's like a good stat.
Wait, excuse me, was it most wins all-time or was games
He's
played?
both now.
Both.
So he got... The cool thing to me is he got wins first, and then he got games, and I was like, well...
That's a flex.
He's actually the GOAT. He wins more games.
He need as many games.
Exactly.
You schmucks.
So he has most games played in the LCS all time and most wins.
Beast mode. All right, but we're gonna talk more fully about LCS. But before we do that, we are gonna go to a quick break, and we'll be back.
Hello?
Bro, what are you parking?
Seriously? What is that?
Remote smart parking assist. You could have parked anywhere.
They could have parked there. They could have parked there. They could have parked there.
Welcome back to The Dive, driven by Kia. And we're going to talk a little bit about Aurora, which...
we started during the break, our little break that we just had, because Aurora, to me, is very OP and has become a frustrating problem. I don't know about you guys, but I was completely shocked when last weekend we had Aurora, both teams, TL, Cloud9, our best two teams, our top two teams, our best students, number one in the class and number two, and they both ban it, and then they realize, all right, they don't play it either. Then they just leave it open. No one picks it. And I'm like, Aurora is 60%, as of right now, 57% ban rate in solo queue because of how frustrating this champion is. You talked about it as soon as the first playtest happened, but you're like, this champ could be really annoying for people to play against. It shockingly is. It had hotfix buffs. It had hotfix nerfs to correct, or actually, excuse me, the wrong order. We had the real hotfix nerfs because she was super OP, and then they actually hotfix buffed her right afterwards, and now I think she is back to OP from my perspective. And so this champion, I just think the ult is so Omega insane. It just allows you to get picks. It allows you to win team fights. She's very good in one-on-one situations. She's very, very mobile, as we kind of suspected from the kit and from the playtests. And so all I'm saying, our pros had better have put in their time to practice this champ, because if you come back for 2 weeks and you haven't done your homework, I'm failing you.
So
from my class.
On pros, they actually talked about this, why TL didn't pick it. And so basically what they were saying was, one team banned it the first game, then the other team banned it the second game. Then when it was up for TL, they wanted to pick it, but Impact said he's been trying to spam it in solo queue, and it's been getting banned every single game in solo queue, so he can't get any practice on it in solo queue because it's always banned. And then in scrims, he's only played against Gnar and Renekton, and those were both banned in that game. So he's like, should I really pick it when it's going to be a matchup I've never played before? So yeah, apparently it's actually really hard to get practice on because, it's like a 60% ban rate, but I think in Challenger, it's even much higher ban rate. So the pros just can't get the champion.
I mean, dude, who wants to play against a good player on that champion? It is
nobody. Yeah,
it is so miserable.
Especially the laning experience is actually
it's
horrible.
It's crazy. I've been watching some top laners. Like I watched Dokla and Lorlo stream a decent amount, and when I see Aurora on either side, it's insane. You try to farm under your turret, you get hit with a QEQ, and oops, that's half my health. Mm-hmm. So, really, really tough champ to lane against. I think, like you were saying in the first playtest, when I saw her, I was thinking that's going to be a hard champ to balance. She's probably going to be one of those really OP or really over-nerfed unplayable champions, because sometimes with the champ, it's just like, if they can do what they want to do, like, how do you fight him? And her thing is just being this kiting mage with, playmaking capabilities. And so, like, that's a pretty strong toolkit.
Do you guys, are you guys on the side of the ban rate is indicative of the player base like revolting and saying, hey, we don't want to play against this type of
it's
new
frustration,
champion.
not power, is what I think bans are.
Yeah, I think
in this case, I think it is both.
Sure. But I'm just saying in general, like if I were to say like what are ban rates based on? Is it based on power or is it based on frustration? I think it's frustration for sure.
And in this case, I do think it is both. And a lot of times, like extreme power is extremely frustrating. Yeah. I 100% agree with you though, because there are champs that are super high ban rate. I remember seeing very recently there was an article about Samira is like almost permaban in China. Because they're so aggressive for lane phase and nobody wants to get, S rank, S ranked on or something, I guess.
It's the same way when
Zed
people
has been
play
like that as well. Forever.
I mean, bot lane Draven Blitzcrank. I ban those when I'm going bot. Yeah. It's not that I can't play against it or I can't beat it, but it's not going to be a good time, and it might be a really, really bad time.
It's even when Zed has had horrible win rates and like not performed well for a really long time. Everyone says assassins are useless. Zed has maintained like a 30+% ban rate like forever. No one wants to play against the champ because when it does do well, it feels terrible, right? Like you get shadow queued into R and then you're just freaking dead instantly. You feel like you can't react, whatever. Most of the time you can't do that, but when it does, it's the number one example I have for the frustration thing is because when I was on League Dev side still was when Tom Kench first came out. Obviously, like everyone hated the W when the Devour used to be on basic ability. People found it so frustrating, and so they nerfed it and they nerfed it and they nerfed it and they nerfed it to the point where it was literally the lowest win rate of every single champion in every role in the game. So it was like banning this champion actively griefed your chances to win the game because it was so horrible that it lowered chances like team
unless
chances.
your team is going to pick it.
Sure.
Yeah, you could self-protect.
There were stats. It was so funny. There were stats that it was actively lowering the chances that any team had to win with it by a significant amount because it'd been so over nerfed, and it was still the highest ban rate champion because even after all these nerfs, people were like Tom Kitch ruins my fun. Like screw this champ. So people definitely ban based on frustration, but
and that's why bans are important. Because that is our way to like revolt and say like, no, I'm not playing against this thing. I'm like, I don't have anything nice to say, so I'm not going to say it. So we're not going to play against this thing.
I don't know if you guys have been feeling this, but the last year or two, I've been starting to feel like bans feel hopeless because there's so many champions now.
You're overwhelmed. You can't fight them all off.
I can't fight them all off anymore. I just have realized for a long time I would always have this is my champion that I just don't want to play, and now there's just so many that I find annoying that I just feel like my ban doesn't do anything anymore. I just like offer my ban up. I'm like, anyone want a ban in champ select and stuff because I'm just like. There's just too many annoying champs. So
you reach the acceptance stage.
Yeah, I've just accepted it.
Well,
I can't ban them all.
It's one trick targeting simulator. If you hit their one trick with a ban, it's super huge value. That's why you go for the Dravens or Riven, Zed, that kind of stuff. Because if you hit a one trick and they're not on the one trick, it's probably a free win.
It's more abusable in high rank because when our games get reset, then we play against the same people usually. And so if I'm ever in a lobby, because I always click Volibear and I'm like, and I trade first pick too. And I'm like, give me first pick. I don't care. I can pick against anything. I'm picking Volibear. If I ever get a remade game like that, I always like wait out of queue for a little bit because if I go back in,
no, it's smart. You have to
almost inevitably.
Yeah.
Like 90% of the time, there's a Volibear ban on the enemy team. So I'm just like, well, man, I have like this extra cooldown now every time.
It's why hovering your champ a lot of the time can be bad in lobbies, which then kind of creates a problem too because,
from your own team if you don't hover.
Yeah, and sometimes you just get these horrible team comps, right? Yeah. If I'm happy to first pick jungle, but if I pick Elise and my whole team picks AP, I'm gonna leave, right? It's like, it's tough.
It is tough. The thing I will say that has blown me away the most when I've played against some good Auroras, like I feel like it's actually really easy to dominate lane on this champion. It is just so OP against a lot of there's I'm sure bad matchups, but like against a lot of the melee matchups top lane is turn off your brain. You can't lose. It feels like, but the thing that really blew me away against some of the good players I played against on it is just you can get picked from so far away. Like this champ goes invis, like hops out of a brush invis, then E's backwards, and then like R's you. And it's like this champion was a full screen away from you and closed that whole gap in invisibility and then did a ranged ult that locks you in. And it's like, you're just getting picked from so far away. It is crazy. It makes it so hard to react to. It kind of feels like almost like when you're playing against like a GigaFed, like Evelyn or something like that. And you always have to be so paranoid about where they could be. But the early game for it is really strong as well, so it is tough to play against.
And you don't get any alert, no cute little heart pops up above your head that's like, I'm coming to charm you.
Yep, it's full,
Aurora's just like out of fog of war, jump invis, jump ult.
Yep.
And the range on the thing is crazy.
It is really long. And the ult's also really good for diving in top lane as well. Good. Because you can bounce in and out of turret aggro range and stuff. So you can like throw it on the ult, they're locked in, you're hitting them, and then you place the ult so it's like just basically the edge of it is by their tower, and then you can like bounce back out of tower aggro range and stuff. Like people can do some pretty slick stuff with it, and it is pretty crazy. Like there's one clip, I think it was like from Busio's stream, where he gets a pick and he is so comically far away from the person and like closes the gap from like 2 screens away instantly with like flash over a wall, E over a wall, like all this type of stuff. And you're just like, okay, good champ.
Well played.
Yeah.
I didn't expect this section to go that long, but I enjoyed it. This was a good therapy session. Maybe we'll have like mid-dive therapy sessions as a standard where we all just could just
mid-dive, start of the dive as well. I complain about my flight. You complain about your mechanics,
we just complain about things now. That's what we do here. Let's get into some good news, though. The LCS, as we look forward to
it's our final week.
Final week of the regular season.
So fast.
It is an exciting one. As you were kind of alluding to, we have another marquee matchup to look forward to, which I really like when we like just start with these, but the Cloud9 FlyQuest now, which is going to be Cloud9 coming in what I would assume would be a bit angry after losing and being humbled a bit by Team Liquid versus a FlyQuest team. How have you guys felt about the current status of FlyQuest? Are you like as strong in vouching for them as equal partners in this top 3 tier that we have established? Because I've started to feel a little bit less sure. Like they're still obviously third, but is it a third of like, oh, you're the very beginning of the next tier, or are you still on same even footing tier with Cloud9?
It's tough. They feel kind of like a dark horse to me, where I think everyone acknowledges that they're good, but maybe not quite as good as C9 or TL, but that might just be a perception thing. I think they are likely around that level for sure. It's just maybe they're a little bit less consistent. Although they've had some really good games lately, especially their bot lane. Masu has had some insane games, like his Callista games really stand out.
Straight up really good.
He's just really good.
He's a beast. So
his improvement is nuts.
Even without this rookie qualifier, which is crazy. Usually we always qualify the performances of a rookie of like, oh yeah, he's really good for a new player. No, he's actually just really good as a bottom laner. He's very consistent. One thing that I also remember them mentioning on pros, though, is that they were a little bit worried for him during meta shifts. If there's going to be, something kind of unexpected, then at least the pros foresaw that possibly giving FlyQuest some trouble. But overall, I would say, I'm definitely very, very impressed with the rookies and how they've played, and especially with Busio having some rough games in some of the international games that they had started to give worry. I know this is something that you were talking about, Azael, where you were worried about him under high pressure scenarios. Busio.
Yeah.
I said Busio.
Yeah.
But he has been playing better in these games leading up to it, so I want to see if that stays true when we do get into playoffs and some of the higher pressure ones. And I would say playing versus Cloud9, even though it's still regular season now, end of season, is fairly high pressure.
So I mean, we can kind of compare the records. So I realized that the TL record included EWC when I said they're 15-5. So that gave them 3 wins and 2 losses. So I guess they're actually 12-3 would be their score. Cloud9 is 11-3. Does this make sense? I think that's what it is. And then FlyQuest is 12-7. But that would include their EWC as well. So how many losses they had at EWC? They just went 0-2, right? So I guess they'd be 12-5. So yeah, let me see. Yeah, it does show. No, 1-2. So they would be 11-5 in LCS. I think that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. So I guess they just have like a couple more losses than those other teams. So like, it kind of does make sense maybe why you're perceiving them as a third place, like more heavily. But I also do think, I mean, I'm feeling that way too. And I don't know if it's just like a play style thing, if it's just because maybe their play style is like less kind of like flashy or something like that, or it feels less dominant. But I'm definitely feeling that way. I don't know if it's fair that I'm feeling that way, but I am starting to feel that way.
So I think what it is that FlyQuest has gone to Game 3 in a lot of their series. So we've actually seen FlyQuest lose more than we've seen C9 or TL lose. You know, even this past week, they dropped a game against Shopify. They dropped a game against 100 Thieves. And they've only had 2 series that were 2-0s. So a lot of them have gone 2-1. And their games, I guess, is, you know, some of their losses, they get totally blown out. Some of their wins are not as clean as, you know, we might see from TL. So I think that's probably a big part of it, but they definitely show a lot of promise. You know, they have some really good games as well.
Yeah.
I will also say one thing that has impressed me, you know, there was the Masu stuff, but also I think the improvement of Quad and incorporating Quad onto the team. He's played 4 games of Corki recently, and I just feel like he's actually become kind of a monster. So
he's pretty much only played 80 carries. This split he's played 10 Corki, 6 Tristana, 2 Lucians. Yeah, I mean, it is the meta for sure. It's just one of those things where, you know, to truly see how good players and teams are, you kind of need to see him in different lights. And so he's doing well in these champs for sure. It's just
get nerfed.
Yeah, right. You know, the upcoming patch was announced where they're trying to buff a lot of the mages and whatnot. So, you know, maybe the meta will shift, maybe it won't. But it'll be, you know, another test for him.
I think it definitely will. Whether or not this next patch does it, you know, they've talked about it. They've acknowledged that ADCs are too prevalent in pro. So if this patch doesn't do it, I'm sure they'll hit them again, because I don't think they're going to want Worlds to be ADCs.
I hope not. I really hope not.
So I think it is going to be, you know, a good question, you know, how Quad will perform on that. But it's not like he's played only ADCs in his career or anything, right? Like, he's played a lot of different styles of champions, and he's more known for the control mages. Like, that's like his style that he's played the most of. So I think he'll be fine. I think he's definitely improved a lot. Maso has really blown me away. I do think partially FlyQuest looks less impressive because C9 and TL are so much more dominant in the early game. FlyQuest, you know, averages like a 1K gold lead at 15. C9 and TL are both like almost 1,800 ahead, right? You know, so they create bigger leads. I think they feel more dominant in that way. But FlyQuest is really, really controlled and really strong. And I think, yeah, the big question when it comes down to these big matches is how will they, you know, perform in the head-to-head? Like, what will the preparation look like? You know, Bwipo, I think, you know, is really, really flexible. He hasn't felt as dominant this split to me as he did last split. I think I was more impressed by him individually last split. But, you know, they obviously have a tremendous amount of flexibility. Like, when you look at the champion pools for Inspired and Bwipo, they can play, you know, basically everything. Masu and Busio are playing a lot of different stuff. So I think FlyQuest has a lot of flexibility. They can maybe surprise teams in draft. They're willing to play different styles, which I think can really be to your benefit. But sometimes you cook too hard and it goes real bad. So I think this is definitely going to determine a lot of how people are feeling going into playoffs. But I mean, I am probably more in the C9 camp right now, and I know everyone from Scrims is telling me that C9 and TL are definitely the best 2 teams. But I think FlyQuest wouldn't be surprising if they won.
Yeah, some of the things with Bwipo that I remember specifically from their Cassante game that he had versus 100 Thieves, and then also from some of the international games that they played, it really feels like there are situations towards the mid game and towards the late game where you can almost see him feeling a lot of pressure to make a play or engage. And it ends up coming out with way too disconnected from the rest of the team, too far forward, really or getting caught out. And the Cassante one, why that one sticks out to me is because there were so many points where he got picked off but the team was so far ahead they won in spite of it, so it didn't end up mattering in that game, and they still won. But I just remember being like, oh man, it's not just an issue of. I remember like the Urgot game happening at MSI, where oh man, he's so far ahead, so it makes sense that he feels like I have to win the game. I have to be the one to win the game for the team. But in this one, it was like he didn't have to win the game at all. His team was super far ahead, and they actually it actually didn't even matter that much when he did, just kind of go get caught out and was dropping sometimes. So that is something that doesn't pop up all the time for him, and he is a good player. But it is just something that can happen sometimes. And if you're playing versus something like Team Liquid, do we ever find ourselves saying that about Impact? I think not.
Very rarely, yeah. And I mean, I think even this last weekend against Shopify, I thought Fake God outperformed him pretty heavily. The first 2 games, the Gnar versus Renekton, I thought Bwipo was like insanely useless. Fake God was actually like making a really big difference in that series. I thought, he potentially could win player of the series and stuff if they were able to actually win it. Obviously, game 3 did not go their way at all. I think that was the Sion game. Let me double check. I think, it was Sion from Bwipo where he had a big impact on that one. But I just don't think he's been as individually dominant or kind of consistent as we have seen. So to me, that's like part of it, because it's interesting. We're like, oh, Quad's gotten way better. Masu's gotten way better. So shouldn't we be thinking of the team even more highly? And this team, was a team that got to finals and all this stuff, but it doesn't feel that way. And I don't know if it's just the meta shift or what it is, but yeah, their top side doesn't feel as dominant, where before the discussion was always like, yeah, Bwipo and Inspired are pounding everyone, but like, I don't know about, mid and bot, how's that going to go or whatever, right? Like, well, and now everyone's really confident, it feels like, in Quad and Masu, but are less hot on the team. So
what I would say is, what I would guess from the outside is that we see Bwipo being a pretty big voice in the team. There's been the narrative of Bwipo and Inspired leading the team as far as how they wanted to play, like, directionally. And we've even seen Bwipo be kind of openly critical of his teammates in interviews and whatnot. So one thing that happens a lot with players is the more responsibility for the team that you take on, the worse your individual performance will be. So if Bwipo is trying to, make macro calls and focus on what the team's supposed to be doing, a lot of times that will really come at the expense of your own personal play, because so much of your focus is diverted. And then on the flip side, your teammates who don't have to worry about that, who are just sort of being directed, can focus more on their individual state of the game. And so that's probably what I would guess is going on.
To that point, though, Bwipo was talking about how he actually doesn't have to make any calls in game, and he can focus because of Inspired, and he can purely focus on his own gameplay, because that's what he was talking about in spring, and crediting what you're saying is that he didn't have to do that, and that's why he was playing better individually. So like, unless things have really changed with how they're doing it, like, he is a big voice, I think, as far as out of game. But as far as in game, my understanding from the words from his own mouth was that Inspired runs the show, and that's why he likes playing with him so much, because it allows him to be more dominant individually, because he just has to think about his own lane, doesn't have to think about anything else, because Inspired does it for him.
Yeah, I mean, that could be. I know that they had a roster change coming into this split with Quad, who he's less experienced than Jensen, so I don't know. That'd be my guess, but no way to really know.
Yeah, if I even beyond like individual players, there's one aspect of this team that I do feel is most rocky, and to me that is frontline in general and engages in general, because the two kind of points that we're talking about as not always problems and not consistently problems, but sometimes, and not being reliable on your frontline play and your engages from either Bwipo or Busio could definitely cause, very big issues if there is a high pressure best of 5, like a playoff game or something like that. If you're not getting good engages after watching the team fights in the Cloud9 TL, especially game number 1, I'm like, if like your front line messes up at all, they're instantly dead, and then it's domino effect. They're chasing down your whole team. Like, you really have to be pinpoint down to the like half of a second on your engages and your timings, and like have your DPS right there ready to follow up and stuff. So I think that's probably one thing that I would look at as far as just tactics for FlyQuest, is nailing down how and when they want to get their setups for these fights so that they can get better frontline play. Because if you have better setups on vision and positioning, and your minion wave is in position early, and then it makes it easier for your frontline to play and to have a good engage and set you up.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, especially when you're comparing to TL, when you're like, well, who do you trust more to engage? Impact and core, or Busio and Whippo, right? So I do think
my all-pro number one top laner and support probably.
Yeah.
That is actually such a good point. Because we're talking about Inspired being the team leader, but the champions he's playing in game are not engaged whatsoever. He's playing Karthus, he's playing Lilia, he's playing Zyra, Brand, whatever. They're not really champs that can start the fight, and so it's really on the non-shot callers. So if Inspired's trying to call them to engage, that just doesn't work very well, because honestly, when it comes to team fighting, especially these front-to-back comps, you need a lot of awareness as the front line, not just on what you're doing, but what is your team doing, what is their team doing, and you need to be really ready as soon as somebody missteps to just pull the trigger super fast. But if it's, one guy trying to tell the other guy what to do, a lot of times that's when you'll see these like really scuffed looking engages where it's like way overextended or whatnot. And so, with TL, the fact that you've got like Impact, Umpty, and Core who are all really experienced, and they're playing these tanky engaged champs most of the time, they're just so ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good point.
It's going to be interesting, though. There's lots of stakes coming into this last week, which isn't always the case. Sometimes you have almost all dead matches. But for almost all the series, we have pretty cool stakes. So for Energy TL, if Energy wins, they guarantee a playoff spot. If TL wins, they guaranteed the first seed, and obviously first team to go undefeated season, LCS history, which is pretty cool. For Shopify, if they win 2-0, so if you watched pros and you listened, I think Sven didn't have the playoff stuff right. So like they were talking about like what they needed to do, because if they win 2-0, they guarantee at least a tiebreaker, but it doesn't guarantee them getting into playoffs. And if they win 2-1, they are out. So 100 Thieves just has to win one game against Shopify, and Shopify will be eliminated from playoffs, and that would mean 100 Thieves are guaranteed a playoff spot. So 100 Thieves just needs one win. Shopify needs a 2-0 and then some help elsewhere, or a tiebreaker to then potentially get through. For Fly C9, it is really big implications on this one, because the winner guarantees top 2. That is the bye, which puts you one series away from Worlds. And then Dignitas and Immortals are also playing this weekend.
They are playing. Yeah.
I don't have any stakes for that one.
Looking at these games, actually, if I was a betting person, I would probably bet on Energy versus TL, not because of how these two teams are right now, nothing to do with the players or how they play in game, but Energy / CLG before, they are the upsetters.
They're the most doubted right now.
They are, but like, okay, so Immortals, when I had Pobelter on our co-stream, and when they went 17-1, it was CLG that upset them. In our early C9 days, it was always CLG that was beating us.
Yep.
CLG is just this team that will just randomly win when they're not supposed to. And now TL, they're setting up for their undefeated record, which hasn't happened. Granted, it's the short season. Yeah. I'll put an asterisk next to it, but I guess technically it is. And here they are against Energy, the upsetters. I feel like if I'm TL, I'm shaking a little bit, because Energy that's what they do. So
true. Yeah, that is what they do.
We'll see it. Can TL overcome the ultimate hurdle?
It's always interesting with these kind of series too, where there's discussion. I was kind of memeing with the Dig Immortals thing, but it's like Immortals is dead. They're fully eliminated. They're the only team that's fully eliminated. But does that make them more or less dangerous, right? And I think it makes them more dangerous.
More, 100%.
Exactly. Some people are like, well, they just won't care anymore, so they're just going to troll. But no, I mean, the pros still want to be able to play in the LCS next split. Like, if you're eliminated, you're kind of playing for your spot, right? And there's not that pressure on them in the same way. You can play a little bit more relaxed. Immortals has so many competitive games. But they always lose, right? Like, they always lose, but they're competitive. And
they're on a 10-game losing streak right now.
It's crazy, but so many of those were close games, at least at one point. You're like, if your nameplate's off, so many of those games you would have thought that they would be able to win, right? Yeah. And so maybe with the pressure off, they'll be able to actually close out these games and put on a little bit more pressure. So for Dig, they're trying to obviously avoid losing to Immortals. They did lose to Shopify. So that happened, and now they are going to be going up against Immortals. So
I think that one is going to be tough for Dig, just because, like you were saying, I think once a team is eliminated, they're actually so much scarier, because all of a sudden, when you have these teams that are, holding on for dear life, they're just trying their hardest, they care so much about the result of the game, I think they actually look a lot worse, because all the players, they're probably not playing super naturally. They're just like constantly, they have this pressure on them. They're worried about what should I be doing for my team. But then you have a team like Immortals who's eliminated. These players, all they're thinking going into this last game is, I'm just going to play my game well. I actually don't care how my team does. If my team does bad and I do well, that might even be better for me. So a lot of time you'll see these players where they're just like, I'm just going to do my thing, and I'm really not going to care what happens. And then in turn, that just makes them and their team look so much better. So I would not be surprised if we saw some Immortals glow up this last week.
they're going Super Saiyan.
So here's my take on it. And I told Sven this when Sven was here too. And he was like, oh, that might actually be the angle where the Immortals players, they're not oblivious to the fact that they're on this giant losing streak and that their team is at the bottom of the LCS and that the LCS is going to be reducing teams next year. Every one of these players is basically, in my opinion, going to be looking at these games as a tryout / like advertisement for themselves,
100%.
for their jobs. And so they will, what Sven was like, oh, so you think they're going to play more selfishly then?
Yeah.
And individually. So I guess it depends on your take. Do you think that more selfish individual play will be better than trying to follow more, like team play and coach specific? I guess nothing can be worse than losing 10 games in a row.
Yeah,
so it will be different. But I think that's the angle that the majority of these players are going to be looking at it, especially the ones that were already talked about positively, but on a losing team in their bottom lane. Tactical and Ole have been the one part of this team that people are like, you know what? If they win, they're going to win through bottom lane. And even other pros, when we talk to other pros, they're like, yeah, this team is good in scrims. And a lot of it is because Tactical and Ole are really good, especially in lane phase. So I don't know. Armeo already had the highest bot lane jungle proximity. I don't know if they're going to be able to pull him bottom lane or have him be more active. But I already said for the last setup for Immortals games, I was like, that should be the game plan. You should make Armeo path towards bottom lane and just camp bottom lane. But now you're
what's hard though? What's hard is that if I was Armeo, I would be so tilted with Tactical and not want to play toward him, because he has thrown so many of their games by specifically getting caught mid. Because it was funny where in this most recent weekend, when I think what was he? He was against Zeri. I think he was Kaisa, and even when he was getting super fed, I was saying, nah, he's gonna throw on mid wave. Like he's just gonna do it. That's what he does. That's his thing. And then he dies to Zeri. 5 minutes later. Yeah. He's just got to figure out how to not throw the game on mid lane. It is so crazy, because if I'm his teammate and you have a player that is just constantly throwing leads, you don't want to play for them. You're just like, dude, I can get you a lead, but you're just going to throw the game anyway.
So here's the other side of it. Because I agree with you. He has thrown a lot of games, but I also feel like he's the only one doing anything positive for his team in a lot of those games too. Like he's the reason that a lot of those games are close, is because he does team fight well, and then he eventually instantly loses the game. But it's like, is he in these dumb spots, or is he like being too far forward because no one's doing anything, or is that just like a flaw separate from the rest of his team's play? Because I feel like when I watch this team, as soon as they get into a competitive spot, they stop doing anything proactive at all, and then they just wait to lose. And that's how I feel about Immortals, and that's why I feel like they lose every single game. They can be up a few thousand gold. I really don't care, because they're not going to do anything with their lead ever. They're not going to start Baron. They're not going to do anything. They're just going to sit there until inevitably someone gets caught, usually Tactical, and then the game ends.
Yeah, that's valid. I think a lot of times that can be the case for players. I think specifically for Immortals, this split, it hasn't really been in my experience. I think that the criticism toward Armeo of being like a KDA player and being overly passive is kind of fair. I think he and the team would probably do better if he just like got a little bit more aggressive, just like tried to start stuff, not really care about dying. But at the same time, I think Tactical is having a lot of unforced deaths. You know, he'll just like
he definitely is.
He'll flash randomly in a fight to get a kill, and then walk up like he has flash and just die.
Yeah, and
you can't be doing that when you're the AD carry. It's like just really the one thing you can't be doing. So yeah, I think that it is true. He's playing really well in a lot of the time, but it's just like in that clutch moment, you can't be making that mistake. If he can just fix that one thing, like he could be one of the best AD carries in the league, but you know, it's not a good problem to have.
No, it's a horrible problem to have. I mean, I think his stock is really, really low. Like you said, you were talking about bot lane. I think people are pretty positive generally on Olay. Tactical, I think people maybe see as a win condition, but also the major lose condition, right? So it is really hard in that way. There was also
infamous kind of lose con.
Yeah, I mean, there's players like that, man. That people talk about. You start falling behind, and people are like, let's kill this guy in the side lane, or let's wait and do that. You know, like there's someone that you're going to target and
Summit.
You know, exactly, yeah, Summit or whoever, right? JoJo. People used to talk about that with JoJo when he would get ahead. They'd say,
we used to, when I was on Optic, I remember we would always call people homies.
Yeah,
like when we play against Shizuke or people like that, we'd just be like,
he's got us.
They're gonna be a homie. Like, yo, I'm coming by. Like, let's kill this guy. He's gonna be a homie.
It's totally true, right? And when you get that reputation as a pro, other pros don't want to play with you, right? Because it's like that's such a negative stigma to have about you. People are gonna have that really negative opinion on you that is like, oh, this is the guy that always is gonna lose the game, right? You don't want to play with those people, so that is tough. There was also really an interesting discussion on pros that I think kind of ties in a little bit here. That's fun because there's different styles of jungling, right? And they were talking about jungling on the good teams versus jungling on bad teams because UMT, you know, they were asking him, okay, what is your all pro? And he said he thinks he's the best jungler in the league. Like he thinks he should be first team all pro. And there was kind of this discussion about, you know, like how do you jungle on a good team versus a bad team? Because he was on obviously some pretty bad teams before. And how do you have to like kind of change that play style? And, you know, basically like would some of the top junglers do well on a bad team? And he was kind of saying he thought Inspired would not do well on bad teams. Whereas, you know, he thought like a Blabber or whatever could do really well on a bad team still because they would be the one to make something happen, right? And it kind of goes to like the Armeo discussion where it's like he's not really the guy to make something happen. I kind of see him as like Inspired Junior, where he's doing that more kind of greedy, selfish play style, you know, just smart pathing, trying to create, you know, farm leads and this sort of stuff, which works really well on a good team. But on a bad team, you do that, all your lanes lose, all of a sudden you're getting invaded, and like the game's over before you had any impact. You know, on bad teams, you need to have that player like a River or a Blabber or whatever who's just going to flip the game and just like try to make stuff happen, right? And I think it was kind of a fun discussion to have them talk about.
Yeah, I remember he was especially complimentary of Boogie.
Boogie
and this is why they started talking about good junglers on bad teams was because of Boogie and because of Shopify. And he was extremely complimentary of him. Just thought he was, you know, put a lot of pressure on him, good at playing the mind games, good at playing multiple styles. And they do look way better with him back in. So I think.
Oh, I mean, Shopify's season has been the best advertisement for Boogie of all time. They looked beyond lifeless. They were like just a corpse on the stage. It was just like intermediate bots might have done better. It was crazy. And then crazy. Boogie comes back and they're actually taking games. He has looked really good. That's totally true. And I think the thing you're saying about junglers is you just have to be okay dying.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I think, you know, on when you play greedier, it kind of, to me, always feels like a consequence of playing too much solo queue, where, you know, you can't die in solo queue. You have to get all the resources. You have to be the strongest guy in the game, and you have to not die, and you win doing that. But in competitive games, it's not really like that. It's a really different game where a lot of times, you know, you just need to put out a lot of pressure on the enemy team. Make it so that a lot of times the best play is putting yourself in a situation where they can kill you, but at what cost, right?
Yeah.
It's like if I go in and I start this fight where they kill me, but then my team cleans them up, like that's probably a one game.
Yep.
And you have to be okay with that. And that's something that you can't really train in solo queue that well because, a lot of times you'll just lose. But
you go in and
it's so important. You got to be able to see the big picture.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. That's something that High used to talk about a lot in old school C9 was, like good deaths and like going in and just dealing a ton of damage and not playing conservatively, but then he dies, but then you guys can clean it up or whatever. I remember he used to talk about that a lot. And when he was on broadcast, we kind of have those chats. And I think there was one of the Zeri plays that stuck out in my mind. People were kind of making fun of JoJo for this one where it was like he like eased over a wall into, I think there was like 3 TL people. And, he goes in, they all turn on him. He flashes back. They flash after him. He dies, but like he gets some damage out and all 3 of them die because then his team caught up and was able to kill them. Right. And it's like, eating into that situation, you're pretty much guaranteed to die if they want to kill you. But like you say, you're setting up for an advantageous trade for your team, right? And it is that kind of theory of it's like, yeah, like not all deaths are bad deaths, right? Yeah. Like sometimes it is.
That was the chase on mid lane. I remember that one.
Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes it is your job to just be able to make them overcommit or to make them spend so much to kill you that your team is guaranteed to win the fight, right? And I think that mindset is sometimes pretty difficult to shift.
Yeah, I'm incredibly excited for this Shopify 100 Thieves series because of that Boogie kind of discussion that they had. Mm-hmm. And I have River. I just have such a high opinion of River. And
really good junglers in the league.
100 Thieves have struggling so much for the beginning of the season and kind of like a similar arc with Shopify. I feel like them putting Tomo in now has completely revitalized 100 Thieves also. So this is a battle to me of 2 teams that were struggling, but were so much better or had the potential to be so much better than they have shown for the whole basically beginning of the split. And now with both of them having really, really good, effective substitutions late into the season, which is very rare to be able to do and actually have success right afterwards. I am so hyped for this matchup. In addition to this, always loving watching River versus any other really strong jungler. So I am really, really looking forward to this one, even though if you look at like rankings or standings, and when you're coming into it, you're like, oh, it's going to be a low tier match. But these are like teams that are way better than their tier now.
Yep. No, I agree. And I think it's fun, right? Like there's I can't remember if he said that he had Boogie as 3rd best jungler or 4th, because he said he was.
I remember top 3, I think.
So but I know there was like he did his top 3 with him in it, and then they asked him to do top 3 without him in it, and I can't remember if he was in the top 3 without him in it or with him. So he was either 3rd or 4th, but either way, thought really highly of him. And Insanity was also on that episode, and he was saying he thought the biggest difference was not necessarily that Tomio was doing like really bad or anything individually. It was just that he was a rookie jungler and Boogie is their biggest voice in comms, right? Like he is their biggest voice for what to do, for when to do it. And he is that proactive person that's going to start fights, that's going to start skirmishes and make things happen for the team. Because like they just did nothing. They just sat there and waited to lose. It felt like early in the split. So yeah, it's gonna be fun. I'm actually looking forward to every one of these matchups, and that's not always the case going into the final week. So it's kind of crazy that we have finally come to the end of the split. It feels like it's gone by really fast, and then playoffs is going to be kicking off pretty soon after that. But that is going to wrap it up for us here on The Dive, driven by Kia. Remember, if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode of The Dive. You can also check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts as well. And make sure you send us your questions on Twitter with the hashtag TheDiveLOL. LCS Week 7 starts this Saturday, 1 p.m. Pacific, as Energy takes on TL, who are going for that undefeated split. First ever in LCS to do it if they can. Make sure to tune in. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you all soon.